to ledger report, Carl, Director Cary, sorry.
Carl is fine. The House and Senate released their proposed supplemental budgets this week. The proposed budgets reflect the legislature's commitment to health, well-being, and learning recovery, as well as support for stabilizing some of the impacts of changing enrollment. So just to talk about enrollment stabilization for a little bit. Obviously, as Dr. Middleton referred to, 3/4 of school districts in the state of Washington lost enrollment. Obviously, they created budgets and they staffed based on a specific enrollment, as we do, as every other district does. Due to that loss of enrollment, the result would normally be, well, to lay off the proportionate amount of staff to be able to do that. The legislature, through enrollment stabilization, is trying to stabilize that enrollment so that districts, unlike Granite Falls, that aren't experiencing an enrollment decline can maintain needed staff, as we've talked about, as we want to do with the levy and stuff like that. So the realistic way that looks in the classroom is these districts, when speaking about classroom ratio, have, right now, lower classroom ratios. They have less students, and they still have the same amount of stabilization. So the legislature is going to kind of stabilize, lock in that enrollment based upon a certain level, or that staffing based on a certain level of enrollment. So the House and the Senate have different versions of that enrollment stabilization in their budgets, and there is a preference. There's a preference for the House bill. There's a preference for the Senate's operating proposal because it provides an additional level of funding. And OSPI actually was good enough to kind of create a spreadsheet, an Excel document that kind of shows every school district's difference in or what they would get in additional enrollment based upon the House budget and the Senate budget. So, they'll talk about the consolidation. So just to quickly run through that and just talk about some neighboring districts. Now, keep in mind, these numbers I'm giving are additional funds that they will receive over their FTE count. Arlington School District, they won't receive any additional if the House bill budget was to pass. However, in the Senate budget, they'd get another approximately $2 million. The Everett School District in the House bill would get an additional $5.3 million, and in the Senate bill would get approximately $3.9 million. Marysville School District in the House would get nothing, but in the Senate would get an additional $3 million. Monroe School District, about 630 in the House, about $4 million in the Senate. And the Sultan School District, sister district, looks a lot like us. We get an additional $677,000 in the House, an additional $300,000 in the Senate. So, foregone conclusion, guess how much Granite Falls would get? $0.0 in the House and $0.0 in the Senate. Now, don't say that to, I have a lot of strong feelings about our relative funding relative to the way that things always shake out. I'm a realist, but essentially what's happening is again, larger school districts that have a staffing level based upon a certain enrollment, which enrollment is what drives everything, as you guys remember from my presentation. They're now getting the additional funding to have these lower class sizes, to then be able to do extra things. They've passed a levy and all of that stuff. And granted, again, good problem to have more enrollment than not. But we've talked about our funding doesn't even meet our needs based upon our regionalization factor. And in all of these budgets, we will get bupkis, nothing. So just as a note, because I find this interesting, if I did the math right, over the 4 years of the proposed levy, we are asking for approximately $23 million. Just as a note, The Bellevue School District, and Bellevue is a much larger school district, extremely affluent area, but the Senate is going to give them an additional $17 million for enrollment stabilization in that district. The House will give them an additional $9 million.
Is that just for 1 year?
Just for 1 year. And the Seattle Public School District, obviously huge district, largest school district in our state, would get an additional $29 million. So $6 million more than we are asking for 4 years of the levy from our residents, and an additional $22 million from the Senate. So, you know, why do I talk about this stuff? There's a lot of conversation I hear online and in other places about how, again, McCleary fixed it, or I've got no more to give, or why don't you go to the state and ask for additional funding? To which I agree wholeheartedly. The state is not its fiduciary responsibility to provide equitable funding for the Grand Falls School District, period, exclamation point. However, this is the world that we live in, and it is what it is. And we desperately, in order to maintain the things we need, we desperately need to pass this levy, because as you can see, unfortunately, the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, the cards are stacked against us. No one is coming to help Granite Falls. We have to do what we've always done and do more with less and help Granite Falls ourselves. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say on that. Anyway, just a couple other things real quick. The Senate Bill 5155, which is a prejudgment interest bill, seems to be moving through. It concerns prejudgment interest. Without getting too complicated, essentially, if a school district is found in the calculation, if the school district is found liable for something, the calculation of interest begins on the day that the thing happens. So, you know, as legal fees go and as the legal process goes, you know, as it goes through the cycle, if that process takes 5 years, from the day that the thing happens, you have to pay interest from day one. Obviously, that's a significant impact to school districts, especially small districts like us. There's a lot of pushback, rightfully so, on that. The other bill I wanted to talk about is there is some movement still on the House Bill 1664, which is the one that concerns the prototypical formula, specifically though, just for physical, social, and emotional support. So nurses and paras and stuff like that, where they're going to change some of those formulas that we talked about and increase them, again, not to a level of equitable need, but that seems to be moving forward as well. None of that's, but it certainly has not passed yet. So on those bills, and I can certainly give the board or anyone else information on how to get a hold of our legislators. I've had multiple conversations with 2 of ours. One of them is awfully hard to get a hold of. I've had multiple conversations with 2 of our legislators and expressed the needs of Granite Falls and have talked about how they need to support these bills. I would welcome anyone else to reach out to them to also express the needs of passing these specific bills. As I said, I can give that information if needed. So that's all I've got.
Any questions for Director Cary? Thank you so much. I just comment of the passion. It's something that's made us angry for years, and you just keep giving us more to be angry about. Appreciate that. 0.0. I'm like, I understand the reasoning and there's logic behind it, but it's just another example of, granted, it just makes me angry. So thank you for keeping that fresh.